Hey there, welcome back to Hipster Codes. This is Hipster George Washington on the new channel, specifically called Hipster Codes. I wanted to reserve the Hipster GW channel for other purposes like gaming and Unreal Engine and stuff like that. So this channel I want to dedicate specifically to coding. Now, it isn't just going to be Python coding. I also want to get into specifically Unreal Engine coding, probably some JavaScript down the road, maybe other types of coding as well. But right now I'm going to kind of be focusing specifically on Python because it's the one I'm most comfortable sharing my knowledge with. So hopefully if that's something you're interested in learning, subscribing, liking the videos, and commenting to let me know what other videos you would like really helps out. I'm here to help provide value, share knowledge, and hopefully learn something along the way as well. So because it's the first video on the new channel, I'm going to do the most basic concept in Python that I could think of, which is just understanding Python data types. And I'm only going to go over what are considered primitive data types right now. I'll save for another video lists, tuples, sets, dictionaries, things that are like these data structures that can contain multiple pieces of data. Save that for another video, probably next week. If you can understand and master Python data types, every step along the way whenever you're building some sort of app, whether it's a web app, whether it's something where you're dealing with a robot or an embedded system, whether you're building some sort of other bot or some sort of web scraper tool or data science or something, if you ever get stuck asking yourself, what data type do I anticipate to be getting? What data type should I be giving this function? What am I expecting in return? If you can ask yourself that question, it's going to solve a good portion, if not the majority, of your bugs and your problems, especially as a beginner, I should say. That we have strings, then we have two different types of numbers that I'm going to go over, integers and floats. We also have booleans. We have none type as well. So these are the ones that I'm going to go over. There technically are other data types like bits. I can't remember all of the other ones, but there's other primitive data types as well that I'm not as familiar with. And in my experience, I haven't encountered them a ton. So I'm not going to cover them in this video. If you're interested, I could always look into them. But just going over these basics to make sure that you start at a really good foundation. Hopefully that's my intention for this video. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So for strings are letters and words compiled in what's considered an immutable sequence. So you can't change a string once it's created. But what you can do is you can create a new string and assign it to the same variable name. So a string in Python, you can have either double quotes or single quotes, but we could have a string here that says, welcome to the new channel, right? And again, we could have double quotes, we could have single quotes, but what you don't want to do is mix and match. You're going to get errors if you mix and match. So also if you ever do quotes inside of quotes, let's say we want to say, welcome to the new channel. You don't want to mix and match double with single. If you ever did specifically want to do double inside of double quotes, what you got to do is you got to put a little, whatever that slash is there to let it know that this is a break character. I can't remember the specific term. So say that we have this string here, and we assign variables in Python. We don't have to worry about const or let like JavaScript. We can just say my string equals the string. So now we have this string assigned to this variable so we can use it later on in the app. Let's just print the string so we'll actually see it in the console. So let's print my string. I'm going to save the script. So I'm going to run this script by saying python3 main.py because that's what I called it. And then we're seeing welcome to the new channel printed out because that's what's in my print statement. So that's pretty basic, pretty straightforward. This is, day one of coding stuff. So, but one thing to keep in mind is if you're ever stuck with your data types, you can always check to see, oh, whoops, let me copy and paste this again because I want to see what data type we're actually dealing with. And the way that you check your data type is by including the variable in your type function. So you see we're going to have my string, which is our string. We're going to check the data type, which we know is going to be a string, but we want to see what it actually looks like in the terminal. And then we're going to print out both of those, and just for good measure to double check them, just running print my string there again. So now we can see if you're ever stuck and you don't know what data type you're getting, double check it by including it in the type function, print that out, and you should see class and then whatever data type you're dealing with. So we're dealing with a string. So strings you can also concatenate. So if we would say, welcome to the new channel, and then we can have my string 2 equals you are the best, and we wanted to combine these into one string, you can concatenate a string. So we'll do my string 3 equals my string plus my string 2. And then if we print out my string 3, it combines it into a new string. Now, strings are immutable, so we didn't change the original string. We actually created a new one utilizing 2 old strings. So that's the way that you utilize strings. You may see in some tutorials, instead of concatenation, you'll see a format string. The old way to do it would be you would have some sort of string, and then you would include these square brackets, and then you would say dot format, and then include your variables. I think this is how it works. Yeah, so you see, Zavda says, welcome to the channel is what it says. But I think it was since Python 3.6 or 3.7, there's this thing called an F string that, in my personal opinion, I think is 10 times better. So if you just put the letter F, lowercase, in front of your string, you can actually utilize your objects and variables inside it without calling that dot format. That dot format, you have to remember what order everything's in. With an F string, you don't have to worry about the order because we're going to say, hey, this is the first string. And then we're going to still use the square brackets, but inside it, we're going to give the name of our object, aka the name of our variable. And so now it says, this is the first string. And then we're still going to print my string 3. Then you could say, this is the first string, welcome to my channel. We actually included the first string in here, and we could do, this is the second string, my string 2, so on and so forth, but this is how you utilize a format string. So I think that's enough about strings. They're obviously one of the most utilized data types in Python. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Let's go on to the different types of numbers. The 2 major types of primitive numbers in Python are integers and floats. Depending on your app, whether or not you want to distinguish the difference between them, it's kind of up to you, but understanding the difference between them will then help you make that determination, right? So for integers, these are whole numbers, positive or negative. So we can have my year equals 1776. Oops, I turned off numlock. Let's do 1776. So we have my string equals 1776. Let's now print the type again. And let's print the value. And I muted out everything up here. So now we should see in our terminal, we now have an integer, 1776. Again, it could be negative if you wanted to, but it cannot be a partial number. So we can't say 1776 dot something, something, something. We're going to get an, actually, we're not going to get an error because this is going to turn this into what we see now, a floating point number. So a floating point number, here, let me copy and paste this down here to make it a little bit more clear. Let's just say my float. So a floating point number looks like a decimal number because they have a decimal place. The way that they're stored in memory is, my understanding is it's considered an approximation to a specific number. So you will sometimes get weird discrepancies when you're using floating point numbers, but they are much more efficient than integers. So you'll see floating point numbers, and let me print out my script now. Yep, so we have an integer 1776, a float 15.15151. So you'll see floating point numbers in place of integers and things like mathematics, science, stuff like that, where they have to do a lot of iterations because it's much more efficient to store a floating point number. It has something to do with the integers are stored in memory Each digit is a certain amount of data that has to be stored. Floating point numbers, I think, are 64 bits, or I can't remember the exact amount of bits or bytes or whatever it is that's stored in memory, but it's stored the exact same amount, so it scales much easier. So if you ever want to see a video, I might do one on the decimal module someday, where you can get decimal points, but you get 100% accuracy. So that's used in things like banking, where the actual details matter. Because sometimes you might get this and then it'll be off by just a little tiny bit, or you'll get a bunch of zeros and a 1 at the end. You can look up the discrepancies if you want to, but these are the major numbers in Python. So if we move on to Booleans, Booleans are true or false statements. So they're pretty straightforward. If we do my Boolean, we can say equals true, and we can do my Boolean, and then we'll be like Borat, and we'll say not, except I'll do it lowercase for good syntax. And we have false, capital T, capital F. Again, these are the only two options for Booleans, and conditional statements, whenever you get into those, always drive down to a Boolean. So this is pretty straightforward. We can print it out. So we can print out my Boolean. We can print out my Boolean not, and then we'll print out the data type too. So we'll do type my Boolean. All right, so we have true, false, and they're all class bool. So if you see class bool, it's true or false. It's the way to think about it. And then we have none type. So Python only has one major primitive value for storing a lack of a value. Other types of languages out there sometimes have more than one for different circumstances. Python just has a none type. So we could say my none type equals capital N none. And let's print out my none type, and let's print out the type of my none type. And if we run this again, oh, I forgot to mute out the Boolean stuff. So let's do that one more time so we get a cleaner output. See, we have capital N none. Now, this isn't a string, and this is a good way to double check your data types, because we want to say, is this a string? It's not a string. It's a none type. What it is a value that specifically says there is no value here. There's probably a better way to explain it, but this is my understanding, is whenever you want to have some sort of variable exist, but you have no data to store there, that's the purpose of a none type value. Further in your developer career, you're going to have more and more circumstances where it becomes clear why you might use these. Specifically, if you dive into an ORM like Flask SQL Alchemy and you query the database and there's no results that you get, it's not going to send you fake results. It's going to send you a none type object, because it wants to have some sort of return when you call your function or method. That's a specific circumstance of why you might have none. So you can say, look, here's the return, here's the value. There wasn't anything proper to return, so we're giving you this none type object, but we didn't want to throw an error. We didn't want to have just the screen be blank. Now, that being said, if you just return none in the REPL, here, I'll just do Python, and then I'll just do the REPL here. So we can just say my none type equals none, and then we return my none type. You see, it didn't do anything. It printed, whenever we printed it, we saw it. But again, if we do the type of my none type. So that's one thing to be careful with it, is if you're anticipating to get something, but you're not returning anything in the REPL, or you're not getting anything from your function, you can always print the data type. If you see that it's a none type, that answers your question why you're getting that weird response. So this is just the very bare bone basics of Python coding that I wanted to go over. So hopefully you found it informative. Please let me know in the comments what other videos would be helpful to go over. I'm planning on continuing down some of the more Python basics. I want to work in some actual projects and eventually dive into either Flask or Django or some sort of web framework to put this into practice of how you could actually utilize this to create some sort of product or something like that. I also am thinking about diving into Unreal Engine coding on this channel as well. If that interests you, go and leave a comment in the on the video as well. Hopefully you like this new channel. I'm glad that I'm doing it just to specifically build a coding channel and some sort of a coding base. So thanks again for tuning in. Again, this is Hipster GW, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.